Welcome back to First Look, where we give you a sneak peek at an upcoming game that you may not have heard about. And this game is pretty unique because it all depends on how you look at it. It's called Block and Key, the next game from Inside Up Games. And every player at the table will have a different perspective on this one. And I mean that literally, because in this game you're going to be looking at the board from a different angle than anyone else. But what everyone else is trying to do throughout the game is going to affect what you're looking at. Does that sound confusing? Let me try to explain. Let's start with the game board, which in this case is the box itself. They've come up with some clever engineering to transform the box into a sturdy, dual-level game board that sits on the table at almost 11 inches tall. This prototype does anyway, and I should point out this is a prototype, so some components may go through some adjustments and changes. But let's get back to talking about perspective and this top level of the game board. I'm not going to get into a detailed explanation of all the rules, but throughout the game, players will be adding blocks of different shapes and colors to the top board. They'll be doing this with the goal of fulfilling the objectives on the key cards in their hand. But since everyone is placing their blocks into the same structure, each block is going to have a chance to either hurt or help your progress. The game starts with just the core cube positioned near the center of the board. But from then on, blocks will be added, according to a few placement rules, and over the course of the game, everyone will be dealing with a much more complex structure than what they started with. But remember, no matter how crazy that structure gets, what your main concern is what it looks like from where you're sitting. So for example, from one player's perspective, it could look like this. But the player on their right might be looking at this. So when they add a block on their turn, it will more than likely affect what you're looking at on your turn. And speaking of that, let's talk about what you can do on your turn. And this is where that lower board might come into play. Each player will start the game with an Enigma card, 3 blocks, and a hand of 4 key cards, 2 easy, 1 medium, and 1 hard. The lower board holds decks for both hard and medium key cards and is also home to what they call the excavation site, a 3x3 grid of additional blocks. So on your turn, you're going to do one of 2 things. Either excavate blocks or position a block. Excavating blocks is simple. You simply take one full row or column of blocks from that 3x3 grid. Now, there's a limit to the number of blocks you can have in your personal supply, so simply discard down if you end up having more than 7. And the grid is refilled before the next player's turn begins. The other option is to position a block. This is where you take one block and add it to the top of the board. Now, there are some placement rules here, but I'm not going to dig into those. Just keep in mind that it must be touching existing blocks, at least by their corners. And there are also some height requirements when placing a block such that any of its faces are touching the faces of existing blocks. And after you position a block, you can claim any number of key cards, as long as the block you just placed contributes to the objective on the key card. For example, let's say I just placed this block. I could then claim this key card, as well as this key card, placing them both face up in front of me. Note that they can be rotated when determining whether you've completed them, and that the empty spaces on the card can be filled by any color. And afterwards, I get to replace any cards I just played with ones from either of the key card decks. And after you've either excavated a block or positioned a block, it's the next player's turn. This will continue until one player plays some number of key cards successfully, depending on the player count. Once the end game is triggered, everyone gets one more turn, and then you add up the scores. Players get the points on all of their completed key cards, as well as 1 point for each block face that they can see that matches the color on their Enigma card. And of course, the high score wins. And that's Block and Key, or at least a little look at it. I saw this game back in 2019 at PAX Unplugged. I was excited for it then, and I'm even more excited for it now that it's started to come together. Be sure to check out their Kickstarter very soon to take a closer look at the game for yourself, but let us know what you think in the comments below too. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and thanks again for watching. Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.